So this is Sarah Carter from the Laboratory of Geoinformation Science and Remote Sensing at Wageningen University. And it's my pleasure to give a very warm welcome to Dawn Wright, Chief Scientist at ESRI. And today we're here to talk about the issue of women in geoinformation science here at Wageningen. It's a very male-dominated department. All our permanent staff are men. So it's a real inspiration to talk to a woman who's been successful in our field. So to begin with, can you just tell us a bit about ESRI and whether it's also very male-dominated or whether there's a more balance of genders?
Well, one thing about ESRI that I've noticed right away is that there's a lot of diversity at the basic level of the company in terms of the developers, the people in marketing, the people who are in international programs, sales. But as you rise higher up in the company, it is very male dominated. So at ESRI we have, of course, Jack Dangerman, who is the founder and CEO of the company. His wife, Laura, has a very, very high role in the company as well as a co-founder, co-owner. Then we have several directors, director of software development, director of international programs, and so forth. And among all of those directors, I believe there are about 15 of them, only 2 of us are women. And until I arrived a year and a half ago, there was only 1 woman. So as I came on board at the corporate level of ESRI, so now there are only 2 of us. So that I think that mirrors what is happening across the board at universities. For instance, if you look at least in the United States, we have a lot of women in our GIS programs. We have quite a few women who are assistant professors, so they're the young professors. But as you move up in seniority among the faculty and the administrators, and this again is across the board in many disciplines. As you in the U.S. it's assistant, associate, and then full professor. And as you go up that ladder, you see less and less women.
Okay.
So,
and do you know about the recruitment process, whether they're getting more applications from men at those senior levels, or is it?
well, at ESRI I don't really know that much about what happens with the hiring processes. Unfortunately, that takes place within human resources. And within the corporate level, I should take that back because we did just hire another director. I believe she's a director of, I need to think of her corporate strategies, I'll just say.
Okay.
So she was just hired, but I don't know about the process there.
Okay.
And with a lot of these higher level hires at ESRI, it seems as though people move up through the system.
Okay.
And so apparently there have been more men that have been able to do that than women.
Okay.
But
so we can hope in the future more women will be able to rise up through the ranks then.
Yes, and even what's happened recently with my hire, and then also with the new hire, this is just a couple of weeks ago, Robin Phillips is her name. So just within the year, there have been two of us hired at the corporate level.
That's good news.
And then there's the issue of ethnic, racial diversity as well.
Yeah.
So that can be a separate discussion, but often it's the same discussion.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. And do you think it's important to have diversity within the different levels, especially within the senior levels?
Oh my goodness, yes, because we talk about we need more women to be educated across the world. How will the world be, what are we missing out on in terms of missing out on the perspectives, the sensitivity, the experience of half of our population? Let's say half of our population is female.
Yeah.
We don't want to miss out on that in terms of guiding our programs, our research, our leadership at the government level. I think this is why we talk about we need more women in these different areas. And we need more people of different cultures and different backgrounds. That's the whole diversity discussion. So I think is very, very important.
Yeah. And what about your career? Have you seen any difficulties in the fact that you are a woman in your career path, or have you not really experienced that?
I don't think I've really experienced it to the point where I really noticed it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that there has been that some difficulties. Well, let me step back, because when you're a student, I think students have the same struggles across the board. Figuring out what you're going to do for a project, dealing with difficult course material, trying to understand and fit in socially. I think male and female students all go through that.
Yeah.
And the good thing about what is happening now is I don't think that it's any more difficult for women in a lot of these areas. Like in my own experience, I didn't feel as though I was held back because I was a woman.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that at all in my educational experience, and I didn't feel as though I was held back or that I was discriminated against because I'm of color.
Yeah.
Now, before I started graduate school, I did have a job for 3 years as a research technician on a seagoing scientific research vessel. And I was at sea 6 months out of the year. And it was interesting because this particular ship, and it still is sailing, it's an oil and gas exploration ship.
Yeah.
So the crew were all male, but the ship had been converted into a scientific research floating laboratory. So they took out the core parts of the ship except for the drilling equipment, because the ship takes core and rock samples of the ocean floor, and then those are all analyzed in various laboratories on the ship. So the few women who were on that ship, we were all associated with the science part. And that ship had maybe about 100 people at any one time on an expedition. And out of that 100 people, 10 of us were women. And there was some, I wouldn't call it discrimination, but sometimes we were not allowed to, or they didn't have confidence that we could handle some of the equipment at sea.
Yeah.
Some of the men on the crew, they were older generation, and so they came out of a world where you didn't go to sea with women because it was bad luck. And so I remember there was one older man, he was the operations superintendent, and during the entire time that he worked for this program, he never told his wife that there were women on the ship as well.
Okay.
But this was back in the mid-80s, 1980s. So there are always barriers to overcome, and cultures need to change. And I think life on that particular ship has changed for the better. So we always hope that things keep improving.
Yeah. And what about women in technical fields? Because we often see a lot of women in the social sciences, and not so many in technical subjects like GIS.
Yeah.
From the beginning of your career, did you see that you would end up in this technical field, or even as the chief scientist at ESRI?
Well, for one thing, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that I would have ended up as chief scientist at ESRI. So that's one thing. I'm still pinching myself on that one. But in terms of being in a technical field and being in a hard science, because my background is in geology, and then oceanography, and then at the PhD level I was in geography and geology. And I did realize that I was probably not going to have women professors, as many women professors, or have as many female colleagues. That didn't really bother me from that standpoint, but I did realize that it was probably going to, even now when I go to, well, I'll just use the example of the Geospatial World Forum, where I was on a panel. It was an industry panel. They were vice presidents or CEOs of Oracle, HP, and I was the only woman on that panel. And when I go to board meetings, serving on various national or international committees, I'm always one of the few females. I'm usually always the only person of color, which is interesting as well.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I think we. So, getting back to your question, I think for a lot of young women, they may see that disparity and be discouraged,
Yeah.
or maybe they are not encouraged to go into technical fields.
Yeah.
So there are opportunities for doing engineering or computer science projects or GIS projects, and they aren't encouraged maybe by their teachers, or
Yeah.
they don't have mentors in that area.
Yeah. And you also just mentioned the fact that you didn't really have so many female role models. But did you have anyone who you saw as a role model who was a female in the field, or?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So I did have during all of my schooling, there was at least one female professor
Yeah.
or female scientist at sea that I could look up to,
Okay.
and I actually had several men who were very encouraging, because I think we often fall back on, well, if there isn't a woman, or if there isn't someone who looks exactly like me, then they can't be a mentor, and that does not have to be true. And then in my case, I'm very close to my mother, so in terms of my professional ethics and professional practice, she is my role model. She is wonderful. She's always been very encouraging.
And I think we've already established that there's a need to encourage more women in the field, or to support them through a career in these kind of subjects. Do you have any ideas, any sort of suggestions of things that we could do to make it easier for women?
Yes, well, I think it starts with little girls, and so there, in the U.S. there are all kinds of programs now to encourage little girls, even in GIS.
Yeah.
For instance, at our ESRI user conference in San Diego, there's always a kids camp, and so little girls and little boys can get involved in GIS projects and do fun things, and there are all kinds of different clubs now. And we can volunteer to speak at these clubs or work with these clubs, again, for young people. But then as we get older, like in the case of your Women in GIS group, I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And it encourages young people, but it also, we give encouragement to each other. So for instance, there is a Women in GIS group in Portland, Oregon, and it's all of the, not all, but several women who work for private companies, or for government agencies, or for ESRI, or they are just in that metropolitan area, and they get together for meals or activities, or it's very important.
Yeah, okay. So just one last question. One of the things that women often find maybe more difficult than men sometimes is the work-life, home-life balance.
Oh, yes.
And is that something that you found difficult to negotiate in your career?
Well, my difficulties are different from a lot of women. The work-life balance is always an issue with marriage and children.
Yeah.
And I have not had that pressure because I'm not married, I don't have children, I have a dog. And so the traveling is still difficult at times, leaving my puppy behind. But there is the work-life balance in terms of working all the time. And in my case, I enjoy my work so much, and there's so much of it, that it is really hard. Even the simple, think about email. It's something like email or texting, if you let it can just completely take over your life. Or if you're on Facebook. Yeah. I know students who are just on Facebook 24 hours a day, and they're never detached from their phones. So I mean, that is a life balance issue right there. So, but I think for women, especially because we are caretakers, even if we are working, we are the homemakers. We carry that load, so it's always going to be an issue. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you for your time, and we really appreciate. Oh, sure. We're done already. Unless you have any last-minute things to say before we finish. Well, I guess I'm thinking there's so many good resources out there now. There's quite a bit that's being written in the academic literature about these issues. Yeah. So I think it's good to be able to connect with some of those articles, and then there are special sessions at conferences now. Yes. It's not being talked as much in the geographic information science community though. So that's something like if you go to GI Science, you're not going to, I don't think there's any kind of a group that talks about these kinds of issues, although that's something that could be started, like maybe a birds of a feather session at a meeting. But there is a lot of really good literature out there and organizations. And for instance, there's the Association of Women in Science, awis.org, that has a lot of great resources.
Okay, great. Well, once again, thank you for your time. It was a real pleasure to speak to you, and maybe
Same
we'll meet
here.
again at some point and follow up on this.
I hope so.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.